November 14th, 1983. Macon County, Missouri. The bank convoy rolled onto Whitaker Road at exactly 8:12 in the morning with two tow trucks, a sheriff's pickup, and foreclosure papers thick enough to erase a man's entire life before lunch. By noon, 72-year-old Harold Whitaker was supposed to lose 312 acres of soybean ground, 3 grain silos, and every machine inside the weathered red barn behind his farmhouse. The younger men climbing out of the trucks looked confident. Clean jackets, fresh gloves, boots without mud on them, and every one of them laughed when they saw the tractor sitting inside the old shed. A 1949 Oliver 88 row crop, 38 horsepower, nearly 5,000 pounds of cast iron and steel. Bought new in April of 1950 for $1,847. The machine looked dead. Dust on the hood, cracked headlight, faded green paint. One tow truck driver spit tobacco into the mud and smirked. "You want us to haul that museum piece away too?" The others laughed harder. Harold Whitaker never reacted. He stood quietly near the porch wearing a brown canvas coat darkened by 40 winters of rain and grease. His hands looked carved instead of aged. Thick knuckles, scarred fingers, fingernails permanently stained black from decades of hydraulic oil and fence wire. Then he looked toward the clouds rolling across the soybean fields and quietly said something nobody there understood yet. That tractor was built before people forgot how to make things last. The laughter faded slightly after that, not because they respected him, because of how calm he sounded. Let me tell you about Harold Whitaker. He had farmed the same Missouri land since Dwight Eisenhower was president. His father cleared the northern pasture using mule teams during the Depression. Harold himself planted soybeans there for 49 straight seasons. He married Eleanor Whitaker in June of 1954, buried her in October of 1978 after cancer emptied nearly every dollar they had saved, then planted winter wheat 3 weeks later because fields do not stop needing work when a man is grieving. The bank manager standing beside the sheriff was 36-year-old Daniel Mercer, college educated, sharp haircut, expensive watch. He had taken over Prairie State Agricultural Credit earlier that year and believed efficiency solved almost every problem on earth. Daniel did not hate Harold. That mattered. He simply believed Harold belonged to another century. And standing behind Daniel was proof of the future he trusted. A 1982 John Deere 4440, 130 horsepower, climate-controlled cab, electronic hydraulic controls. The machine cost more than Harold's farm had in 1958. Daniel admired it the way younger men admired progress itself. But the rain had not stopped for 6 straight days. Fields across Macon County had turned black and soft. Modern combines kept sinking axle deep in soybean mud. Heavy tractors buried themselves trying to escape. Everybody was nervous. Everybody except Harold Whitaker. Daniel opened the foreclosure folder carefully. "Mr. Whitaker," he said respectfully, "if payment isn't made today, ownership transfers at noon." Harold nodded once. No anger. No begging. Just silence. That silence unsettled Daniel more than shouting would have, because defeated men usually sounded defeated. Harold sounded patient. Then another truck appeared down the gravel road, a mud-covered Case IH combine. The driver jumped out before the engine fully stopped. "We got another one buried," he yelled, rear axles halfway down. One banker laughed and pointed toward the Oliver. "Maybe Grandpa's tractor can save it." Several men chuckled. Harold let them laugh. He simply walked toward the shed, slowly. No hurry. The sheriff watched him disappear into darkness beyond the sliding doors. For almost 20 seconds, nobody spoke. Then came a metallic sound, a toolbox opening, fuel splashing into steel. Another pause, then silence again. Have you ever known you were right, while everybody around you laughed like you were already finished? That was Harold Whitaker standing inside that shed. Not angry, not embarrassed, just certain. Let me tell you about the Oliver 88 sitting in front of him. Harold's father bought that tractor after the Korean War, reserve call-ups in 1950. Before that, the Whitakers farmed with horses and an aging Farmel F-20 that struggled in heavy Missouri clay. The Oliver changed everything. 6-cylinder engine, heavy rear axle, massive low-end torque. Samuel Whitaker used to say it pulled like a mule that hated losing arguments. Harold learned to drive it at 16. He plowed his first soybean field with it in September of 1951. He drove Eleanor through floodwater with it in 1958 when the county bridge disappeared underwater. Every dent on the machine meant something. Every scratch belonged to somebody gone. Outside the shed, Daniel checked his watch. 11:07 a.m., less than 1 hour before foreclosure. The tow truck drivers leaned against their rigs, smiling. Then the first ignition crack exploded from inside the shed. Not a full start, just one violent burst. The laughter stopped instantly. Smoke rolled beneath the shed doors. Then came another cough. Longer this time. The old engine turned again. And then something happened nobody standing in that muddy farmyard expected. The Oliver started. The sound did not resemble modern machinery. Modern tractors hummed. The Oliver thundered. Deep, uneven, mechanical in a way that made men feel the engine through their boots before they fully heard it with their ears. Blue smoke curled from the vertical exhaust pipe, while Harold eased the tractor into daylight one slow foot at a time. The faded green paint looked gray beneath the storm clouds. One rear fender carried an old weld line from tornado damage, repaired in 1968 after a storm clipped the western pasture. And yet the machine moved with quiet confidence. Nobody laughed now. Daniel Mercer stared openly. "You kept it running?" he asked. Harold shut the engine down long enough to answer. "No," he said calmly. "I kept it ready." That line stayed with Daniel Mercer for the rest of his life. The combined driver hurried toward the tractor. "If that thing can pull my machine free, I'll pay cash." Harold looked toward the flooded soybean fields. "No," he said. "You'll help your neighbors after." The younger banker rolled his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "That relic weighs half what the combine does." Harold ignored him completely. He wrapped a thick logging chain around the combine frame himself. Mud sucked against his boots while cold rain tapped across steel. Daniel watched carefully. "Mr. Whitaker," he finally asked, "why didn't you sell this tractor years ago?" Harold tightened the last hook. "Because my father trusted it more than most men." Then he climbed onto the seat. No speech. No dramatic moment. Just work. The Oliver strained immediately. Rear tires sank 2 inches. Mud sprayed behind them. The engine growled deeper. Everybody watched silently. For one terrifying second, it looked like the tractor would stall. Then the chain tightened. The combine shifted. 1 inch. Then 2. The younger banker stopped smiling. Harold never increased speed. That was the strange part. The old tractor pulled with patient force instead of aggression, like a draft horse dragging timber through snow. Then suddenly the combine lurched free. Men shouted. The driver nearly slipped in the mud, running beside the machine. Daniel Mercer actually laughed once in disbelief, not mockery, shock. The Oliver kept moving another 20 feet before Harold finally stopped. Silence settled across the field, except for rain tapping against metal. Then the combine driver walked toward Harold and removed his cap. "I owe you," he said. Harold nodded once. "No," he answered quietly. "You owe the next farmer stuck worse than you." That was the moment Daniel Mercer realized something uncomfortable. Harold Whitaker did not think like the bank. The bank saw ownership. Harold saw obligation. By afternoon, word spread across Macon County that an old Oliver tractor was pulling modern equipment from flooded fields. Farmers started arriving one by one. A John Deere planter buried near Kalau. A grain truck trapped beside Route 36. A New Holland baler stuck in a drainage ditch. Harold helped everyone. And every time he did, the same thing happened. Men stared, then stopped talking, then started respecting something they had dismissed an hour earlier. Have you ever owned something everybody else called worthless until the exact day they needed it? Because before sunset, that old Oliver became the most important machine in Macon County. Daniel stayed beside Harold all afternoon instead of returning to the bank. Officially, he was waiting to complete foreclosure paperwork. Truthfully, he was trying to understand Harold Whitaker. Late that evening, After the fourth recovery job, they parked beside a flooded soybean field glowing orange beneath the setting sun. Daniel looked toward the tractor. You really think older machines were better? Harold considered the question carefully. No, he finally answered. I think people used to build things expecting hard times to come. That answer landed harder than Daniel expected, because Daniel suddenly realized his generation built machines for comfort. Harold's generation built machines for survival. Rain intensified after dark. By 8:40 p.m., county roads were flooding. Then a sheriff deputy's radio crackled alive. A school bus carrying 12 children had slid sideways near the Chariton River crossing. Tow trucks could not reach it. The mud was too deep, and the river was rising fast. Every eye turned toward Harold Whitaker. He looked toward the old Oliver, then toward the storm, then quietly reached for his coat. And what Daniel Mercer said next, nobody expected. I'm coming with you. The word surprised everybody, especially Daniel himself. An hour earlier, he had arrived to take Harold Whitaker's farm away. Now he was climbing into a freezing Missouri storm beside him. Harold nodded once, as if he expected it all along. The Oliver started again with a violent cough and a burst of smoke that disappeared into the night rain. Headlights cut across flooded soybean rows while the sheriff's pickup followed close behind. The road near the Chariton River looked worse than anyone imagined. Rain hammered the field sideways. Water rushed over the bridge approach in fast brown sheets. The school bus leaned dangerously toward the ditch, rear tires spinning uselessly whenever the driver touched the accelerator. 12 children sat inside, most under 10 years old. Terrified, their teacher stood beside the road, waving frantically. Tow trucks had already failed twice trying to pull the bus free. The mud swallowed everything heavy. Daniel jumped from the pickup and nearly lost his footing instantly. Harold moved slower, calmer, the same way he moved around every difficult thing in life. He studied the mud first, then the angle of the bus, then the current crossing the road. Only after that did he speak. If the rear slips another foot, he said quietly, that ditch takes the whole bus sideways. Nobody argued, because everyone suddenly trusted the old farmer more than the officials. Let me tell you something important about old farm machinery. People today confuse horsepower with pulling power. They think bigger numbers solve everything. But tractors from the 1940s and 1950s produced enormous low-end torque through heavy cast-iron drivetrains and slower gearing. Torque is twisting force. Horsepower measures speed over time. In flooded ground, speed becomes the enemy because spinning tires polish mud into slick clay. Older tractors transferred power slowly and steadily. They did not panic when resistance increased. That difference matters. Harold wrapped the Oliver's chain beneath the front axle of the bus himself. Daniel held the flashlight. You ever done this before? Daniel asked. Harold almost smiled. Pulled a milk truck from this same ditch in 1962. Then he climbed back onto the tractor seat. Rain drummed against the old metal hood. Children watched silently through fog bus windows. The sheriff raised his hand. Harold eased the clutch forward. Nothing happened. The tractor tires spun once. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Then Harold stopped completely. He backed the Oliver 6 inches. Adjusted the angle. Tried again. This time the chain tightened smoothly. The engine deepened into a heavy mechanical roar. The bus shifted. 1 inch. Then another. Mud exploded beneath the rear tires. The teacher covered her mouth. The Oliver kept pulling. Slow. Steady. Unstoppable. Then the bus climbed free. Children inside burst into cheers loud enough to cut through the storm itself. Daniel Mercer stood frozen beside the road staring at the old tractor while steam rose from the engine into freezing rain. Because suddenly that machine no longer looked outdated. It looked immortal. After the children were safely evacuated, the sheriff walked toward Harold and removed his hat. You saved them, he said. Harold shook his head. No, he answered quietly. The tractor did what it was built to do. That line spread across Macon County faster than the storm itself. By morning, farmers were talking about the Oliver in diners, grain elevators, and church parking lots. Even people who never respected Harold Whitaker before started driving past his farm just to see the old machine parked beside the shed. Daniel Mercer returned to the bank exhausted and soaked. Foreclosure paperwork still waited on his desk. Technically, the debt remained unpaid, but something had changed. He opened Harold's account history again. 32 years without missing a payment before Eleanor's illness. Medical bills from Columbia hospitals. 3 years of drought losses. Equipment loans refinanced after interest rates exploded in 1981. Daniel finally saw the truth. Harold Whitaker was not irresponsible. He was overwhelmed. And the bank had mistaken hardship for failure. Have you ever realized somebody you judged too quickly was carrying a burden you never bothered to understand? That realization can change a man. It changed Daniel Mercer. 2 days later, he drove back to the Whitaker farm alone. The foreclosure folder sat unopened beside him. Harold was inside the shed, changing oil beneath the Oliver. The tractor looked enormous in the dim light, every bolt carrying the quiet dignity of something maintained instead of discarded. Daniel removed his gloves slowly. "I was wrong," he said. Harold kept working. "About the tractor?" Daniel shook his head. "About you, that mattered more." Then Daniel placed the foreclosure folder on the workbench. "The bank board meets Friday morning," he said. "I could delay the seizure 45 days. Harold finally looked up. "Why?" Daniel glanced toward the Oliver. "Because some things deserve more time than paperwork allows." Harold studied him carefully, then nodded once. No speech, no dramatic gratitude, just respect. But before Daniel left the shed, Harold Whitaker said one final thing. And after hearing it, Daniel Mercer understood the old farmer had known the outcome long before anyone else did. "My father used to say a man learns who he really is the first time everything important depends on old things still working." Daniel Mercer carried those words for the rest of his life. The Prairie State Agricultural Credit Board approved a 45-day extension after Daniel personally argued for it. He arrived with photographs from the flood rescue, statements from the sheriff, and repayment projections showing Harold could recover financially if soybean prices improved by spring. Some executives laughed at him, dismissively, the exact same way people laughed at Harold. Daniel recognized the sound immediately now, and this time he refused to join it. By February of 1984, soybean prices climbed enough for Harold to negotiate a structured repayment plan. Neighboring farmers whom Harold helped during the flood quietly contributed labor, repair parts, and fuel throughout winter. One man rebuilt a grain auger for free. Another repaired damaged fencing. The combine driver Harold rescued paid several overdue feed invoices without telling anyone. Macon County remembered who showed up when conditions became impossible. Harold never asked for recognition. That was why people trusted him. Let me tell you about the Oliver after the flood. The tractor became legendary across northern Missouri. Farmers brought their sons to see it. Mechanics studied the 6-cylinder engine like historians examining a battlefield relic. Harold still changed the oil every 90 hours, exactly the way Samuel Whitaker taught him in 1952. He still greased every fitting by hand, still warmed the engine before hard pulls, still parked the tractor inside during winter storms because machines lasted longer when somebody respected them enough to protect them. In September of 1985, Daniel Mercer returned to Whitaker Farm, carrying something unexpected, a cashier's check. Harold looked confused. "What's this?" Daniel smiled. The county fair committee raised money to restore the Oliver. Harold stared silently for several seconds, then shook his head. "No restoration," he said softly. "Working tractors should look worked." Daniel laughed. A real laugh this time. Not mockery, understanding. So instead, they rebuilt only what mattered mechanically. Fresh bearings, injector service, new hydraulic hoses. They left the dents untouched, because history lived inside those dents. Years passed. The Whitaker farm survived, then slowly expanded again. Harold's granddaughter Emily returned from college in 1991 and learned machinery maintenance directly from him. Every Sunday afternoon, they worked together inside the old shed while Harold explained carburetors, ignition timing, and why farmers should listen to engines before trusting gauges. Daniel Mercer kept visiting too, not as a banker, as a friend, By the late 1990s, newer tractors across Missouri carry computers, electronic sensors, and digital control systems. Some worked beautifully. Others spent weeks waiting for repair technicians. The Oliver never stopped. In October 2001, after 51 harvest seasons, Harold drove the tractor one final time across the soybean fields west of the house. Emily rode beside him, standing on the axle housing, exactly the way Harold once rode beside Samuel Whitaker half a century earlier. 3 weeks later, Harold Whitaker died peacefully in his sleep at 79 years old. No hospital, no machines, just a farmhouse built by his grandfather and the land he spent a lifetime protecting. More than 600 people attended the funeral. Farmers lined pickup trucks across Whitaker Road for nearly half a mile. Daniel Mercer stood near the back, holding his hat against cold autumn wind, while Emily drove the Oliver slowly past the cemetery after the service. The engine sounded exactly the same. Deep, steady, certain. Today, the Whitaker farm still operates outside Macon County under Emily's management. The Oliver 88 remains inside the same red shed behind the farmhouse, though every harvest season it still pulls wagons and rescues heavier equipment whenever the ground turns wet. Daniel Mercer retired from banking in 2014. Inside his office hung only one photograph. Harold Whitaker standing beside the old Oliver during the flood of 1983. Below the frame sat a handwritten sentence Daniel copied years earlier inside the shed. Some things don't become obsolete. They just wait for people to remember why they were built. If you knew somebody like Harold Whitaker, somebody who quietly kept old things alive long after everyone else called them finished, tell me their story in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want to hear about the Iowa farmer who had a 1937 case tractor beneath hay bales for 12 years, so the bank could not seize it during the farm crisis of the 1980s, that story is coming soon. You'll want to be here for that one.